Hello and welcome to Dead Creepy Podcast's Bedtime Story Special Edition. So go and light the campfire, pull up your chair and get ready for some spine-chilling stories told to you by LINZI Smith, DARYL WHITEBoTTOM and me, Claire Barrand. Enjoy.
This story is called Twin Pond Ghost. In 1972, when I was 17 years old, a friend had drowned in a pond on a farm. It is called the Twin Ponds because there are two ponds close together. He had been swimming with his cousins. His name was Gary and he was 19 years old. He had natural curly shoulder-length black hair. About 1 or 2 months after he'd died, his mother called me wanting me to come and stay with her for a while because she was alone. She lived in walking distance of the ponds in a small house that had 4 rooms downstairs and 1 room upstairs, on a country road where there are not very many cars. Gary's room was the one upstairs. The stairs were the type that had a wall on each side and a door at the bottom of the stairs. His mother told me that I could sleep in his room, but I did not want to. Everything was still the same as he had left it. It still looked as if he would be back at any time. So I stayed in a bedroom downstairs, next to the stairs that led to his bedroom. One night, when I had gone to sleep, I was either sleepwalking or dreaming that I was walking down the road in the direction of the Twin Ponds. There was a bright full moon, and I was standing there wondering why I was alone on the road at night and where I was going. I saw someone walking up the road towards me from the ponds. As he got closer, I saw that it was Gary. I tried to speak to him, saying his name, but he would not answer or look at me. He was walking at a slow pace, a few inches past me, with his head down, and his eyes were half closed. I could have reached out and touched him, but for some reason I did not. I saw that his hair was wet, but it was not raining. Water was dripping off his hair and face and glistening in the moonlight. I watched him as he walked towards the house and disappeared. I guess he was walking home. What happened next is where it gets strange, because I can swear that I was awake at the time of this. I woke up in bed, thinking about the dream I had just had, when I got a funny feeling that I was being watched and that I was not alone. I turned over and looked at the open bedroom door. That is when I saw Gary standing there. He was leaning against the door with his arms crossed, with a blank stare, and smiling at me. He was wearing a white t-shirt with a v-neck, long baggy sleeves, and dark pants, the same thing that he was wearing when I saw him on the road in my dream. The curtains were open, and the moonlight came through the windows, so I could see him clearly and everything in the room. I rose up on my elbow and smiled back at him. As I started to speak to him, he started moving towards me. This is when I became scared and threw the blankets over my head, because he was not moving in a normal way. He was floating and gliding with his arms down to his sides. I saw nothing below his knees. That was when I remembered that he was dead. I had forgotten until then. While I was under the blankets, I started praying really fast, waiting for the blankets to move or for him to touch me. After a few minutes that seemed like forever, I peeped out from under the blankets and saw nothing, so I jumped out of bed and ran across the room and turned on the lights. I must have made a lot of noise when my feet hit the hardwood floor getting to the wall where the light switch was, because his mother came running into the room from her bedroom with just her nightgown on and a worried look on her face, asking me what was wrong. I lied and told her that there was nothing wrong. It was embarrassing, waking her up in the middle of the night. and also I did not want to tell her that I thought I had seen her son's ghost. Then she started laughing and said, "You are lying. You saw Gary, didn't you? I know you did. I can tell by the way you're acting and the look on your face. You are really pale. He won't hurt you. I see him all the time." That did not help any. I already knew he would not hurt me. That was not what scared me. I was not scared of him until I remembered that he was dead. We went back to bed and I slept with the light on for the rest of the night. When it became daylight, I told her that I wanted to go home, but she wanted me to stay with her, telling me again that Gary would not hurt me. As it was getting dark out, the more nervous and scared I became, so she let me go home. I could not spend another night there. I still went and spent time with her during the day, but I would not stay there at night. I would just leave before it started getting dark. She has died since then, and I know she is with her son now. It has been 30 years now, and I still cannot go to the house at night. This story is from thoughtcatalogue.com. The story I'm about to tell is completely true. Having said that, there are some disclaimers I will add at the end. About 3 years ago, I moved to the city I'm living in now to go to school. Before I moved, I was living about 1,400 kilometres west, working as a pump tech. The month before I moved, I had to make a few trips back and forth to finalise everything, find an apartment, etc., etc. Anyway, what happened took place on one of the return trips. It was late at night, and I was almost home, about 2 hours away. Now, this was only my second time making this return drive, and so, because I didn't have the route perfectly worked out, I was using GPS to supplement my knowledge of the road. I reached an area where I knew I had to make an exit. Problem was I couldn't remember which one it was. I looked at the GPS and it told me I had about 1 kilometre before making my turn. So I looked at the GPS periodically and gauged my distance. When I was about 500 metres from the turn, the GPS did something odd. The screen flickered momentarily and then started changing the route. The GPS now told me to drive an extra 15 kilometres and turn onto a different exit. Now, I was in no mood to argue with the GPS, so I figured, fuck it, it's calculating the quickest route. What's the worst that can happen? So I comply. I took the turn the GPS told me to take and drove along the road for about 45 minutes with no problem. My iPod was dead, so I was listening to the radio and smoking some cigarettes, just having the best time I could possibly have, alone on a highway at 3 a.m, after having already driven 9 to 10 hours. That's around the point I began entering a dense fog. This was one of those fogs where you can barely see the road in front of you, the kind where you have to kill your high beams because they'll just blind you. While driving through this fog, I began to notice that parts of the road felt a little weird to drive on, and when I hit sections where the fog cleared, the highway was suddenly a good 15 feet above the ditches. You literally could not see the ditches on either side of the road, just the fields they climbed towards. It looked as if the highway was a winding bridge. What was worse, however, was what had been making the odd sounds on the road. Roadkill. Not just regular run-over squirrel and stuff like that. It was more like somebody fed a deer a stick of dynamite and set it off. Animals had exploded all over the road, as if a semi had been ploughing into animals at incredible speed. It wasn't even just 1 or 2 animals either. Every kilometre had at least 2 exploded-looking animals on the pavement, in between the intermittent walls of fog. I looked at the GPS again, and it said that I had about 80 kilometres to my turn-off. which was a problem because I was only doing about 60 because the conditions were absolute shit. So I'll suck it up and keep going. The radio lost its signal around this point. 2 stations were fighting over the only frequency that seemed to be getting any signal whatsoever. I turned it down a bit and lit up another cigarette. Then I noticed a yellow glow on the road coming from the ditch, so instinctively slowed down in case it might have been a deer or something. As I passed by, going about 30, it didn't look like a deer at all. It looked as though it had hairless skin and sort of like a dark mustard sort of colour to it. It was right at the edge of the highway too, as if peering over from the ditch. I cannot say for certain, but it almost looked human-like, hairless. But its eyes were golden, and its skin dark yellow. What was most off-putting is that when I drove by it, it hunkered down as if it was trying to hide, with only its eyes visible. And then, as I passed, its head turned and got up a bit again, watching me drive off. That really freaked me out. Little did I know, shit was about to get crazy. As you can imagine, I didn't know what to think about whatever it is I may or may not have seen in the ditch. But rest assured, I just wanted to get home by this point. Fog cleared considerably, and the highway eventually turned into a heavy wooded area that didn't seem to be populated whatsoever. I started to realise there was a problem when I was about 2 kilometres away from the highway I was supposed to turn onto. There was no apparent highway in the distance. When I got 300 metres away, still no highway, so I get closer and closer. The GPS tells me I'll need to turn right in 200 metres, then 100 metres, then 50, and then it tells me not to turn right, but to turn left instead. And this is all so confusing because there should have been a highway. But all I could see was a single tiny dirt road. I really should have known better. Should have known that turning down that road was a bad idea. But what else was I supposed to do? I turned left onto this dirt road, which was more like a path. It was so narrow, my car barely fit into it. This is where the most frightening thing that has ever happened in my life occurred. The road starts doubling back towards the direction I had come from, like a half circle. And the road is so narrow and the trees are so thick, I can't actually see what I'm turning towards until I've already made the turn. The second the turn completed, the dirt road ended and led into a small clearing. Inside that clearing, oh, you know, just an abandoned church and graveyard. I look up at the bell tower and saw what I was and still am convinced was a silhouette staring out towards me. I looked down on my GPS and on its screen were the 3 most terrifying words imaginable. You have arrived. Well, I got the fuck out there as fast as I could. Now for the disclaimer. I don't know what the hell was going on that night, and I never will. I was obviously tired as hell, but to perceive things that inaccurately, I don't know. I might have just been seeing things, but I know that GPS took me somewhere it shouldn't have. Well, just wanted to share that, and again, it's 100% true to the best of my recollection, and no, I haven't used that GPS since.
My mate Talker Joe told me this story, right? He reckons it's totally true, but I think it's probably a load of crap. But anyway, this is what he said to me. It were a few months ago. and I had just moved into my new student house with a few friends. They'd all gone home for a few days because it was summer holidays, but I stayed there on my own. I was home and it was brilliant for a few days or two. Then things had started to get a bit weird. Things like small things being moved around, like my notes or the TV remote control. I just assumed that it may have been the wind or something. The next few days I started to hear noises in the night. Not like farts or loud noises, but like small whispers, as if someone were in the house trying to be quiet. I just thought, well, it's me head, isn't it, playing tricks on me. The night after that, I heard a door slam and it woke me the fuck up, and I was sleeping like dead normally, so it was proper loud. So I got up and I started freaking out because the bathroom light were on. The light switch is on the inside of the bathroom. I went to try and open the door to see who were in it, and it were locked, and the light then turned off, and the door then unlocked. And when I checked, no one were in there. But I was shitting myself, and so I hid under the covers for the rest of the night. I stayed up all night and then just went home in the morning to my parents until everyone else would come back. When I told them all about what had happened, they said it were a load of bullshit. Anyway, nothing else has happened since that.
Strange things are happening in my town in South Korea. Part 2. Thanks for all the interest in my stories, everyone. I'll try and keep updating as often as possible. Things are getting difficult around here. My computer broke recently. My own fault, really. A long night of beer and soju don't exactly help my balance, and it might take me a while to get it replaced. On top of everything else, I've been having trouble getting to sleep properly because I've been staying up late digging into all this stuff. Sasha, a fellow teacher at my school, told me today she's worried it might start affecting my work. I think I need to take a few days and clear my head of all this. Somebody suggested I try and translate what that man on the street was shouting at me, but I haven't had much luck trying to repeat it from memory. The Korean staff at my school kind of laughed at me when I asked them about it, which I assume means I'm saying the phrase wrong, so no luck there for now, but I will see what I can do. All that said, let's begin. MERS. Well, I should bring this up as well, especially considering how much interest people had in the subject after my last post. Well, I remember reading that post by MERS Quarantine before I even left for Korea, which is partly why I voiced concerns to the directors at my school. Well, not that I wasn't sceptical. If I'm being honest, I remember reading it and thinking, nah, there's no way this could possibly be true. But even though I've been living here for a while and I haven't actually seen any of the things he described, I really have no idea what to think anymore. Well, I arrived early in July this year, which was right towards the end of that MERS outbreak in South Korea, or at least that's what the data seems to indicate. Well, the towns affected were predominantly in the northwest part of the country, and one of them just happens to be Pyeongtaek. Well, I had already received my contract when I learned about the outbreak, and some Googling told me that many schools in the area had temporarily shut down and suspended bringing in new teachers. I contacted the academy that hired me to see if they intended on delaying the start of my contract, but they said they couldn't afford to wait. As a private academy, they were under pressure from financiers to continue classes on scheduled classes until it became too risky to do so. One of their teachers was leaving and they needed a replacement right away to take over classes. I expressed some concern about the disease, and in the end they offered me additional compensation if I showed up on time. It sounded risky, but I needed the money, student loans, so I decided to chance it. The disease was contained soon after I arrived. Fortunately, I managed to avoid exposure. In fact, no one else here, even the locals, really talk about it that much. I remember one of my students brought it up shortly after I was hired, but other than that, there was practically no mention of it. The only reason I even bring it up is because I frequently chat with locals online to learn more about the country and the culture. So sometimes I ask what their experience during the outbreak was like. Mostly people said it was a little scary or tense, but not too bad. Everyone always seemed to know someone who had the disease, and one person I talked to claimed they had been diagnosed as well, but discharged 2 days later. She said she wasn't actually feeling any better, but that a new doctor had shown up and said they found no trace of the disease in her, and he made her leave the hospital. She told me she was still worried about infecting people, and so she had shut herself up in her house and refused to leave, saying, "It's better this way, it's better just me." Sometimes it seemed like people couldn't agree over the details of the situation, so even just basic facts like what areas were affected or for how long. The death toll changed completely. Some people mentioned numbers as low as only 2 or 3, as to as high as, in one instance, many thousands. I eventually looked it up, and the actual number, according to the Ministry of Health and Welfare, was 36. It came up in another conversation, and the person I was talking to said that the number was wrong. It was actually 612. I told him I got the number from the MHW, and he said he had as well, and he sent me a link. It was the same page I'd already visited, but I clicked the link anyway. It still said 36, but he insisted that it was specifically 612. Another person I talked to insisted that there had been no disease outbreak for as long as he'd lived in Korea, and he'd never even heard of MERS. Well, I mentioned the outbreak had happened recently, and he just responded "liar" in big capital letters and disconnected. Those were a little odd, but some of the things people told me were just creepy. According to one of the Korean teachers at my academy, there were a couple dozen outbreaks in our town, but fortunately the fatalities were low. Most people I talked to online said the same, but one guy said the situation was like a plague. He told me that the streets emptied completely and people stayed locked up in their houses for weeks, that the hospitals filled to capacity within days, and entire trains full of the diseased and dying left for vacant hospitals in the south every day. He started going on and on about insane symptoms that I'd never heard associated with MERS, like skin rotting through to the bone and teeth and hair falling out, and outbursts of violence and insanity. Of course, I could find nothing to back this up, so I asked him at what point things got under control. He said he had no idea what I was talking about, and that the situation had gotten much, much worse. I assumed he was either nuts or messing with me, so I disconnected. Disappearances continued. Well, I posted to a message board for other teachers in my area, asking if they had ever found any strange or abandoned things in their town. I described the things my co-workers and I had talked about, like someone was using them and then suddenly vanished into thin air. I'm going to post a few of the things that they said here as well. A teacher in Chenyuan was walking to school when she heard the sound of a car crash from around the next intersection. She ran to see if she could help and saw that a small blue car had slammed into a transport van heading in the opposite direction. The van driver was getting out and seemed unhurt, but when she went to check on the car driver, there was no one in the driver's seat. She had no idea how that driver could have gotten out and left before she arrived. A guy who works administration at a school in Seoul posted up that he finds abandoned half-full grocery carts at a particular store that he visits. He even said that a couple of times he could have sworn that they were still moving slightly. A public school teacher wrote that he saw a dog wandering around a park in Asan. The dog was trailing a leash attached to its collar. There was no one else around. He said that the dog kept pacing back and forth over the same few meters of trail and whimpering constantly. Someone on the site wrote that a busker in Hongdae had apparently wandered away, leaving his guitar and tens of thousands of won on the street. A friend of the busker was asking everyone who passed if they had seen him around. Apparently, he had been gone for hours by that point. One teacher posted that an older woman was sitting across from her on the subway and that she vanished. He said he turned to look out the window for a second, and when he looked back, she wasn't there anymore. I wrote that her stop was probably coming up and she was just getting up to leave, and he said, well, maybe, but I didn't see her anywhere else on the train, and we had just left the station. Also, she left her purse behind. This one isn't from the site, but I ran into a public school teacher at a gym in Pyeongtaek. The gym is on the top floor of one of the buildings downtown, and out of the elevator window you get a pretty cool view of the rest of the city. Anyway, the teacher told me this when I mentioned the odd disappearances. Honestly, man, I thought I was going insane for a while. You know that block of apartment buildings Samsung is building in the north end of town? Well, you can see them pretty clearly when the elevator gets up to the top floor. Anyway, a few days ago, I came up here to work out, and I remember clearly looking out of the window and watching 6 or 7 cranes moving around the site, working on the buildings. I went into the change room and then realised I'd forgotten my running shoes back at school, so I went back to the elevator to go and get them. And I swear to you, man, in the minute or so it took me to walk from the elevator to the change room and back, every single one of those cranes had just disappeared. Students. One of my students has been missing class every Wednesday for the past few weeks. Now, because we're a private academy, we teach each group of students 3 hours a day, twice a week. Students will usually have classes either Monday or Wednesday, Tuesday or Thursday, or Wednesdays and Fridays. Missing class is fairly uncommon for our students because the parents are notified whenever they don't show up to class. I decided to talk with him the other day to find out if everything was all right. When I mentioned that he'd been missing classes, he looked confused, and he told me he'd been to class every day. Our classes are very small, 8 to 10 students, and I keep an attendance record. He definitely hadn't been there, and he got upset when I said this, and said he was there every day. He even showed me his notebook to prove he'd been taking down notes. The notes were accurate. I assumed he'd just copied them off another student, but after a minute I realised this was impossible, since our students have to leave their books in classrooms when they go home at night. There was no way he could have copied 2 sets of notes in class without me noticing. I decided to leave because there wasn't a lot else I could do. The whole situation was just weird to me, and besides, it is up to the parents to discipline their kids for missing class anyway. So it wasn't worth pursuing it. I sat there for a while trying to figure it out after he left, and then I had a strange thought. I pulled up my attendance record on my computer and I grabbed every notebook the students had left behind. I looked through the record for absences, which were rare but did happen from time to time. And I opened up their notebooks to the corresponding date. Every single one of them had notes from the days that they had missed. The notes were complete and followed the lectures perfectly. Some of them even had drawings in the middle of the page. Now, if they were somehow copying the notes, why would they stop to doodle all over the pages like this? Then I noticed one difference. The essay topics. Now, I always make my students do a short essay practice at the end of every class to help them prepare for exams. The topics are always easy and they relate to the lecture, like, would you like to be famous one day? Why or why not? Or, do you think it's important for children to learn musical instruments? They're just light subjects so that students can get some writing practice. But the essays written during these absent days were all very strange. One of the students who was absent in my first week had an essay titled, "Is it okay to attack someone if you think they are going to attack you first? Why not?" Another student had an essay titled, "3 reasons mandatory army service should be 5 years instead of 2. I couldn't figure it out. Why copy the notes but write a whole essay on a completely different topic? And why did they have to be so grim and violent? Now, this is the part that really made me shiver through. The last book I checked belonged to a 10-year-old girl named Jane. That's not her real name. To make it easier for foreign teachers, our students choose English names for themselves, which are either similar to their real Korean name or just one they like the sound of. Jane is incredibly sweet and shy, but also brilliant. Probably one of my favourite students, even though I'm not supposed to admit that. Now, right before I closed her book, I noticed something she had drawn on the back of her notes from the absent day. There was a stick figure version of me, tall with glasses and a beard. My kids draw me in their books a lot, and one of her. I had a weird, twisted look on my face, and she had drawn herself with a frown. Underneath were some words in Korean which I scanned with my phone and translated into the following phrase. Why is teacher so sad today? Well, that's all I have for now. Like I said, I'm going to take a break from all this and try and clear my head. I don't know if I'm in any immediate danger or not. And when everyone I talk to seems to be saying something different, I have no way of knowing for sure. I look out the window and everything seems fine. But then people tell me these insane stories and it just doesn't feel like fiction anymore. I'll update when I have more information for all of you. Thanks for reading so far. Stay safe.